everyone, welcome back to Growing Together with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we discuss everything under the sun related to growth and how we have navigated this growth journey that we're on. Today's episode is meant to focus on how Cesar and I went from growing apart to growing together. But just want to see how, Cesar, you are doing today.
Good. We got this podcast up and running. We got our coffee as always. And yeah, I mean, what better way to start a Saturday than shooting a podcast? So it's always fun doing these.
Yeah, if anyone was wondering, we always shoot our podcasts on the weekend because we both have work to do during the week. So this is the optimal time to get this done, but it's something we definitely enjoy doing together.
Yes.
So today's podcast requires a little bit of a backstory and insight into Cesar and I's lives and our relationship. So I can start off like kind of telling the story, but Cesar, if you want to, chime in at any point.
Yes.
You can chime in as well. So basically, way back yonder. No, way back yonder. I just wanted to be like back in the 1900s now. Cesar and I met in 2017 at a wedding and immediately fell in love. It wasn't immediate, but like we definitely felt a connection. And at the time, Cesar was living here in Las Vegas and I was living in Tallahassee because I was still in school at FSU. From the time that we met to like the next time we saw each other, like 4 months had passed. Like I met Cesar in August of 2017 and then I planned a trip back to Vegas in December of 2017, and throughout that time like we were like talking to each other every day. Like we kind of made each other like a pretty significant person in each other's lives, and in December of 2017 we started dating, but because I still had about, I think at this point it was like 2 years left of college, right?
Yeah, about 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years left of college. We had to do a long distance, and that was rough. Like, I don't know how it was for you, but it's not for the faint of heart. So we did long distance for 2 years. And then finally, when I graduated, I was fortunately able to transfer with my current job and move to Vegas to be here with Cesar. That's kind of like the short story of like, how our relationship began. But within those now the 4 years that we've been dating, 4 or 5 years that we've been dating, there have been a lot of difficult points. And Cesar and I kind of had to learn how to navigate both our growth journeys, like as people together. So the reason we thought of this episode is because not a lot of people know this, but Cesar and I broke up at one point. So when I was back in college, we had been dating probably like 8 months at this point. And I was going through a lot in my personal life. My mom was just diagnosed with cancer. School was just rough. And I hated the fact that I missed Cesar so much. That sounds so cheesy, but it really was. It's like I hated missing him. And I thought that if I ended things with him, it would at least cause that aspect of my life to not cause me any pain. So I unfortunately broke up with Cesar, and my mindset at the time was that I needed to figure out my life by myself. And I bring this up because I feel like a lot of people feel like they have to navigate the difficult parts of life alone. I think we found that to not be true. We were only broken up, I want to say, for like a month and a half before I realized like he wasn't the source of my problems. Like eliminating him from my life wasn't gonna help me either. And there were also some other things we struggled with. I think our communication wasn't great, and like I think we just didn't really know how to navigate long distance as well at the time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of the reason there was like external factors that I don't know if if you actually want to get into them, but like people that surrounded you and stuff like that kind of had an influence on it, I would say, based on what you told me before, at least. But yeah, I mean, I would say though, part of it did have to do with like communication, like on my part. I felt like I was doing enough, but you know, obviously, like it's something that we early on didn't talk about a lot. You know.
Yeah, I think one of the things is Cesar and I didn't really set expectations. I feel like that's such a like corporate term, like set expectations. But we were navigating the first 8 months of our relationship. Like it was going well, but at the same time, I don't think we had really made each other a priority because a lot was going on in my life, and so like I don't know how to describe it. And like for instance, like I didn't know at the time when the next time I would see Cesar in person would be. So we weren't really planning trips to see each other. It was kind of like when you can. And that kind of bothered me too because I wanted to know when the next time I was going to see you was. And like everything just felt like a lot. So there were a lot of things that led to that breakup, but none of it really had to do with the fact that I didn't love Cesar or that like I didn't think we were meant to be together. It just was hard on me. And looking back, I felt so bad about even doing that. I felt so bad about like I felt selfish at the time, but I also felt like I needed to look after myself, and I thought that this was the way to do it. But we did end up getting back together. I want to say we broke up in like November and got back together literally in December because I went to go see you still. And we definitely set different expectations when we got back together of what we needed. So Cesar and I like kind of like planned like, okay, well, you'll come see me here and I'll come see you here, and kind of work to communicate with each other, and like versus like pushing each other away, we kind of like brought each other closer, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I feel like after that moment in December, we made plans to like see each other a lot more often. Obviously when possible, like if I could go like every month or every few weeks, like I would totally go, but like Tallahassee was pretty expensive to go to, especially.
Yeah, Tallahassee's not the ideal place to be doing long distance.
It was cheaper. I mean, flight-wise, I remember it was cheaper to fly to Orlando than drive if you get a car or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we just made more time to see each other. Obviously, we were already talking on the phone and FaceTiming all the time. It's just more on the communication side of things for sure. Like being clear on like, what are we gonna do? You know, who's gonna move where, like, because obviously you're gonna graduate soon too, if I recall.
Yeah,
so like
there were some difficult conversations we had to have in our relationship too, even after, you know, like we call it like our exodus. We had to figure out like, okay, well, what was the future of our relationship? Like I at some point was gonna graduate, and at that point I need to find a job in my field, and like, but I also didn't want to continue long distance. And I don't know if Cesar's gonna get mad at me bringing this up, but Cesar and I had this conversation a little bit early on in our relationship, maybe a year and a half into us dating, so I still had a little bit ways before I like graduated. And we talked about like, you know, I had no problem moving here because like I wanted to get out of Florida, but I did ask Cesar if he would move to like Florida or basically anywhere else that I wanted to be, and he legit told me no. Yeah. He was like, no. Yeah. And I had never been so hurt by an answer because I'm like, I literally am gonna move for you, and you're telling me right now if I asked you to do the same thing you wouldn't.
I mean, looking back at it now, I mean, I've told you the reason why, but in short, I would do it now. Like, obviously, we're literally we're talking a lot about like, you know, when we get the opportunity, under the right circumstances, I would totally move. You know, like
I think it speaks to the time. Like, I don't blame Cesar for this. Obviously, we're still together. It wasn't a deal breaker for me.
For some, that would be a deal breaker.
It was. Yeah. But I loved you so much. So I was like, you know, we'll figure this out later. But obviously, I brought this up later to you and was like, you know, why did you say that way back when? Because, like, you know, that is hurtful. And, like, I feel like a good part that we learned from a lot of the experience of the breakup and everything is that we learn to communicate each other. And like, I'm not afraid to ask you like, hey, like, why did you react this way, or why did you say that? Because yeah, it was in the past, but like, it is important for us to uncover like the reasoning and like whether we can deal with that reasoning in our lives. And Cesar's obviously changed his mind from then, and you know, he had his reasons back then. I don't think they were bad reasons, but definitely hard to hear at that moment. But Cesar and I learned just kind of how to communicate better, not just communicate better, but like what each other like needed during times of struggle, what we needed when the world was just throwing us curveballs from that. And the reason I bring it up, this topic is really important to me, and I think it can be helpful to other people, is that we do often tend to seclude ourselves and feel like, you know, in order to become the person that I need to be, I have to grow. I have to go at this growth journey alone. Like, the only way to become my best self is to do it by myself. But I think we've learned is that we both individually can be on a different growth journey and navigate it together. I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast, is that we're constantly learning and how we can grow as individuals, but how Cesar and I can support each other in our growth. Cesar and I would like to say, are dreamers. Like, we are wanting to do what feels impossible. Our goals and our dreams are just big, and I honestly can say that Cesar has made me believe in myself more so than I would have, I think, if I were with someone else. I think a lot of the things I'm passionate about are things that people are like, would say, oh, stick to your day job, you know, wouldn't necessarily push you to pursue it. But Cesar has always been that person for me to believe that I could do whatever I wanted. And I think that's helped me on my own personal growth journey, is like, he recognized that I needed that person who believed in me. Like, when I started my blog, Cesar was one of the reasons, because he was like, you're really good at writing, like, you should start the blog. And so I started posting more frequently on my blog. And when it came to even this podcast, he was like, yeah, you can do it. Or like, just anything that like was creative, Cesar was like, oh, you should totally do that. And I think that was so helpful. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a huge part of growth, is being, not even just being with someone, like, even if you take out, like, obviously Cesar and I are in a romantic relationship, just relationships with people, having people in your corner. Yeah,
having people that are supportive about, like, whether it's like the decision to be with somebody, or whether it's the like some kind of artistic opportunity, like whether it's creative or maybe you're building something with people. I mean, like, having people in your corner to be at bat for you, you know, to be like, yeah, no, I support you on that. Oftentimes it can be like a solo journey. And that's the thing, I know what you're referring to here in regards to, like, sometimes people feel like it's better to go at things alone, but in reality, I don't think so. I think it's always good to have someone you can voice your concerns to, like a sounding board, like, hey, like, I'm thinking about this. Obviously, having that person to also be, you don't want someone who's always pessimistic. You're always voicing your you know, your ideas too, because then, you know, obviously pessimistic people will just be like, no. You know, just always. I think it's important, but though, it's important to know who it is. Like, a support system doesn't necessarily have to be someone that agrees with you. I learned this through, like, oh no, I'm not saying that has to be someone that agrees with you. But like, yeah, I learned this through my sister. She didn't say this to me, but dealing with my sister. Me and my sister had a very rocky relationship for a long time. Ironically, we're twins, but we had a very rocky relationship. And I think you might have told me this was like, I don't have to agree with what my sister does, but I should support her. And I think that's a huge thing when finding people that support you, is like, they don't necessarily have to agree with what you're doing. They don't have to like be full on board, but I think, you know, they should be supportive. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do.
but like going back, like you don't want pessimistic people. You want people like, I think it's important to have people who would tell you like the reality
of course.
things, but also be like, but I believe in you and I think that you can do this. And let me know if you need any help along the way, that kind of thing. But that's made like our growth journey, I feel like, super. It's not easy, obviously growth isn't easy, but it's definitely nice knowing that, like, for instance, I can go to you and like you're gonna offer me some type of feedback or like, you know, support that I need to continue going, because a part of this is also like self-doubt. Like when you're doing things that you love, you're gonna start, even if you feel great about it, at some point you're gonna start to doubt yourself, you know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very natural thing to do. And I think, I mean, that's a totally different conversation, but definitely you can start doubting yourself and you feel like you may or may not have like done the right thing or decided to do the right thing, or like you feel like you may or may not be on the right path. But having that like support person, you know, to be like, hey, like, am I doing things right or whatever it is, like that definitely helps out along the way, for sure.
Yeah, I think though too, part of what helped Cesar and I during, like, obviously, like, we broke up, then we got back together, and like now, I mean, I feel like, you know, we're alive and we're thriving. It's just we did learn like how to communicate with each other. Communication is an issue not just in relationships, in just so many areas of life, in work, and building
the whole world, I think.
Yeah, like I think a lot of issues come down to communication. So it feels cliche, but I've realized it's such an important aspect of our lives that we have to really figure out how to nail. And Cesar has learned to communicate with me, and I'm going to bring up something he'll probably hate again. But Cesar's a very honest person. I would say you're very honest, and for the most part, you're very direct. And a little thing about me is that I'm sensitive. If you look at me the wrong way, I'm going to assume that you hate me. A lot of things are going in my mind. So I'm a little soft marshmallow that needs to be dealt with carefully. Not to say you can't give me feedback. There's just a way to give it to me. And early in Cesar and I's relationship, this was probably like within the first year, Cesar and I were talking on the phone, and I was showing him a project I did. And granted, this project was not good. I wasn't very savvy with what the project needed me to do. And I asked Cesar what he thought of it, and he'd not even look at me. Mind you, we're on FaceTime because we're doing long distance, not even looking at me. He's like looking at his computer screen. He's like, yeah, it sucks. And I was like, what? What did you tell me?
And I would say, honestly, that was probably one of the points. It's not to say that's the point. That's the reason why we broke up. But that was
it
like
had something to do with it.
Like I think maybe a week later, and that's when, like, I don't know, there's a lot going on. Again, you had a lot going on in your life with your family. But like, yeah, I remember I was just like, I was looking at it, I'm like, dang, like, what the hell? It was like a Venn diagram of stuff. I don't know. I just remember seeing a Venn diagram, like a bunch of random pictures, and I'm like, what in the world is this? And then I'm like, yeah, this sucks. And then just like, because I was in the middle of doing something too, and I was in the middle of like sending out a message or something, an email, and then just the look on your face of how sad she was just like, what in the world did I do?
I was so
what
upset.
Did I say?
Yeah, and Cesar, like, that's the thing, is like Cesar, being the direct person he was like, what? Like, what did I do wrong? Mm-hmm. And for some, like, that would have been perfectly fine to say in a conversation. But knowing me now, Cesar knows, like, if he's gonna give me feedback, like, he can tell me in a way that if I had a project that it sucks, but he knows how to give like constructive.
For example,
feedback.
Can we do it now? Can we do
okay.
All right, so you're showing me something.
No, I'm gonna show you. I'll show you my
right.
This is my project. Okay.
Okay,
Cesar, this is my project. I want to know what you think of it. Can you give me some feedback?
Yeah, let me see. I think this is pretty good. Yeah, I think I see the point you're making. I see, like, obviously you have some tips here, and whatnot. But have you thought about maybe changing like this right here? Like, what does this have to do with that? That's my question. Yeah, like, because I'm confused. Yeah, that's something I would say. Because I was questioning the Venn diagram or whatever it was. Because I'm like, what in the world is this? And then because I know how Sonny is in regards to like how artistic and how creative she was. And that thing that she showed me was
he did
like,
not feel like
it was not to par with what I know she can create, which is why I'm like, what in the world's going on? Like, this sucks.
I was in college though. I also wasn't trying like. I'm a hard worker, but C's get degrees. And I think this class I would struggle with because I do find myself to be a creative individual. But when it comes to certain programs that I'm working with and certain things, I do struggle with those. I need a lot more time than most people. Like, I can eventually learn them, but I just need a lot more time. And college semester doesn't give you a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that was my thing. But that just goes back to like Cesar and I learned how to communicate with each other through like these experiences. We learned like what we can and can't say to each other, or just how to say those things, how to give feedback. And that was like a game changer for our relationship. And this is not to say like, I don't think Cesar and I have the perfect relationship. Like, we don't. We have our own issues. We continue to have issues, but every relationship does. And
not every relationship's perfect.
Yeah. And I think, though, that we are consistently trying to learn how to better support the other person. And I think a lot of it had to do with the experiences that we had, the breakup and everything that we've been through in our lives that has led us here, that has, like, navigated our relationship. Like, for instance, like, the next thing I'd bring up in this, like, area, I guess, is that obviously we made it through the long distance. I moved here, but moving here and being here the past 2 years hasn't been easy. And it definitely took a toll on our relationship too, because we went from being long distance and then living together in person, and that transition is hard.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. It was a challenge for both of us. We had different ideas for how all this would work. But, like, you know, there's just obviously, like, a lot has happened since, like, you've moved. I mean, I wouldn't even say since you moved here, but even before, and then obviously after. Not after. It's not like we left yet, but.
Yeah. But, like, navigating how we make each other a priority in each other's lives. I think when we were doing long distance, we were making each other a priority, but like if Cesar couldn't FaceTime one night, it wasn't the worst thing in the world because I had friends in Tallahassee. I had a life. That's the other thing, just to go back real quick, is when I lived in part of the reason of the breakup for me was Cesar and I were living such separate lives. With the long distance, it made things so difficult because like I had my life and my friends in Tallahassee and everything there, and Cesar had this life here, and I felt like the future me thinking of like, well, when we tell our kids about college, like we're gonna have two different stories. Like it kind of hurt me because I wanted to feel like our lives were intertwined, and that sounds crazy, but I did. I felt like our lives were so separate and there was no like meeting in the middle at that point. Like when we were doing long distance, we had each other in our lives, but like we still had very separate lives, so merging them was very difficult because we had to learn how to make each other a priority in person. And also just like living together is can be difficult because you have to get like to know everyone's habits, but we had to learn how to live together, and that's
a challenge on its own too.
That can be the reason people break up, man.
No, I mean, again, I'm not a relationship expert or anything like that, but I mean, there's people that. No, I'm not. No, I don't think anyone is.
I wouldn't know.
That's a whole other topic of conversation. But I think people have their own experiences with their own relationship, whether married or, you know, long term. Just people that don't get married, but just stay together. But not like what they've learned doesn't mean it reflects on everyone else's relationship.
Yeah, I think every relationship
it's good tips.
is different.
There can be good tips.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's everyone has different upbringings. Everyone has different lives, like different.
That just reminded me of something. The upbringings reminded me of something. So yeah, Cesar and I, for instance, had very different upbringings. And moving here, Cesar has a lot of family here. Like his mom and dad live here, his brothers live here. We actually live with his eldest brother Noah right now, who's incredible for letting us live here, because the housing market and rent is just expensive, and I'm broke as a joke. But I had to kind of get used to that too, because Cesar's family is like the Sunday dinners type of family, and not to say my family and I didn't spend time together, but like I had been kind of solo for 4 years. Like I went to college away from my family. I was living my own life, that learning to like kind of just that those things, like going over to Cesar's parents' house every weekend was like normal. That like was like weird for me at first, because I was like we go here every weekend, or and it wasn't that I hated it either. It's just like getting used to that, and getting used to being around like a bunch of people who are now obviously going to be my family, because we're getting married soon. And it was different. I get kind of anxious in social situations, and I do love Cesar's family. Like I love your mom and your dad, but it definitely was weird to navigate, I think, just because we did have such different upbringings and like views of the world.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, it's just different, when you're brought into a different social situation and you're just not used to it, and then everyone has different levels of comfortability. But yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, like we ended up managing.
We managed to, and I think the other thing was, it was a lot of it was in my head too, because Cesar's Mexican, I am Mexican. I know I look white, but I am 50%. My dad's Hispanic, and my Spanish is not great. I took a lot of Spanish in college because I wanted to learn, because my dad didn't teach me, but I do have a lot of Spanish-speaking family. And then obviously your parents speak primarily in Spanish, like that's where they're comfortable, so I kind of want to meet them where they're comfortable. But I think that was another part of my anxiety, was like, okay, like I'm already nervous and anxious, like I want your parents to like me, like I want them to like see why we're right for each other. But also communicating like the messages in Spanish, is super hard, and like I get nervous speaking Spanish a lot, and I can definitely understand it more than I can like reply back. So it was a lot. There were a lot of factors at the time, but I mean, we've navigated, and that's something we continue to work on, obviously. I think when it comes to relationships, or even just relationships with other people, like friendships, that kind of thing, you have to go in with like a certain empathy and understanding for that everyone grew up differently. Everyone has a different idea of the world and their part in it, and I think we have to be more considerate of people and like maybe why they are the way they are,
and try to understand that too, because versus trying to quote unquote put your like fix towards it,
I think like a perfect example though is like, for instance, like I think in the first couple of months, like we'd go to like your family gatherings, and when you go to those, when you get to them, you have to say hi to everyone, like, oh hi, like all that kind of stuff, and then before you leave, you've got to say goodbye to everyone, or else like it's not polite. And I'm like, I'm not a rude person, but damn, like, this is a lot. And, like, so, like, that was something that I was like, okay, this is polite, so we need to actually, like, make it known, like, hey, we're here. And then also, hi, but goodbye, we're leaving. That was something that I was like, we gotta do this. Because, like, for instance, like, my dad was Hispanic, but, like, we didn't grow up, like, in that, like, realm. Like, like, so it wasn't like that, and like we've gotten for like walking into family's house without doing all of that, so I was just like, okay, like this is something that we've got to do, that was just bonkers for me. I understand it now, but like at the time it felt bonkers.
No, again, like I said, like different upbringings. So, and that's the thing is like it's I don't know, I mean I that's how I was brought up, as a kid, to be polite to people that you may or may not know.
But I don't think it's about politeness.
Well, it's just about it's because it comes from the culture. Like I said, like it's like you've been to Mexico, like we were talking about in the last podcast, and everyone there, like no matter who you are, you're walking down the street, there's a lady sweeping on the street, and she says hello. To like even if she doesn't know you, she'll tell you how you're doing. You know. How are you?
I think it comes from the American culture of don't talk to strangers.
Yeah, no, I mean that's part of it. Yeah, don't talk to strangers, or also like I mean I don't know, like everyone, like I said,
that sounded rude. Like I don't mean like the American culture is the right way, because I don't believe that either. But like I grew up being like, oh, don't talk to strangers, and now we're more like talk to strangers kind of thing. But like in the culture, like the thing is, when we were in Mexico, I also felt very different. Like you're in a smaller community, like when you're in the pueblos, like it doesn't feel as weird. And at that point I think I had gotten a little bit more comfortable. You kind of prepped me for our Mexico trip. Cesar, when we went to Mexico, he was like, you got to eat all the food that's offered to you. You can't be picky, because I was a very picky eater. And when I tell you I listened. I was like, I can't refuse any food. And then like which also opened like my palate, because I was super picky eater and now I'm not as picky, I'd say. But he was like kind of just describing the culture to me, and like when we were there, like just teaching me like the do's and do nots. So that was an eye-opening experience into culture and how everyone's different, and how to navigate like that. And I think that's obviously helped me understand like your family more and that kind of thing, so I can go in with a better understanding like why your family likes to do these things, and I can be on board as well. But it definitely was like a learning curve. And I know Cesar's met my family too, and like we're not like crazy, I'd say, but we're different like from what he knows. And Cesar is such a understanding person. I'd just say that. Like Cesar is probably one of the most open-minded people, and like he doesn't judge people. He just he lets people be. And I think that's something that I just love. But yeah, I think that's something too, obviously, that I think that gave you a brownie brownie points with my parents, is like how you are as a person. We discussed this in the first episode. I know I'm not really good with first impressions, it's I'm trying to be better. I said in that episode I wasn't going to change it, but I do try to be better when I meet people. I do want to get them to like know that I mean well. Like I was telling my friend Alyssa that I work with, shout out to Alyssa, I love her, she's so great, but I was telling her that like I don't think people really like me. She was like, what do you mean? Like, I think you're like incredible. Like, she was being so nice. I was like, thanks. But I was like, I just think for some people I don't give off like this impression that they love, like I think I've made better relationships with the people I work with now. But I know there's aspects of my personality that people don't like. I know that you understand me. Like, I'm kind of a feisty individual. I am very, which I wasn't always what I'm about to say, but I'm very, like, if something's bothering me, I'm gonna let you know. And I've learned to stand up for myself a lot more. Before, I would let a lot of people walk over me, and I was very, like, I was very shy, and I wasn't going to tell people when I felt a certain way. But now I'm very, I'd say, kind of outspoken and, like, loud, and I don't keep what I think to myself. Like, I'll let you know. And I think that people don't necessarily like that all the time. And for me, like, it's something that I don't change, because like you understand like why I'm like that. And it's also because I spent years like not sticking up for myself, and like so now I'm like I have to do what's right for me,
Yeah, no, of course it's all about like again, upbringing, how you were brought up, and then you realizing I need to stick up for myself. When you're right about something, and you want to let people know like, hey, this is actually the proper way to do this, or whatever the case is. And oftentimes that can make people think you're like, I don't know if the word like hard ass, I don't know, that's probably not the right word. No, I mean like because you're being assertive, Yeah. I mean, some people don't like people who are assertive.
Whenever I hear that word, I think of the episode of SpongeBob where he's like, I think there's an episode where he's learning to be more assertive. Yeah, it's funny.
But yeah, I mean, just some people would rather they assert their position of whatever it is on you, and you just comply. But for the most part, I see you now more of like, no, like I know what I know, and if I don't know something, I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
So then, like, you have to at least respect the people have to at least respect what's being said. But some people don't like that. So
yeah. So I'm learning and unlearning. I think that's a huge thing of growth is like learning and unlearning. I think personally in things that I experienced like in my childhood and like, you know, our upbringing, I learned from it, but there's also some things I have to unlearn, and things the way I was when I was in high school is like I need to change, I need to grow, I need to find out, you know, who I'm actually meant to be. So I'm unlearning some of the ways that I used to act, and it's a hard process. Like it requires a lot of self-awareness. I think even being like in our relationship, we both have to be self-aware. And that's a hard thing too, because being self-aware doesn't mean you recognize, you know, all the great things about you. We also recognize like the things that, you know, we don't like so much. And like, to be completely and open and honest, like Cesar and I, like, you know, for instance, I have a lot of things that I know Cesar doesn't like. I'm quite like, for instance, I like things done a certain way, and I can get frustrated when they aren't done a certain way, and often I can let out my anger on Cesar, and I've had to recognize like when I'm doing that and try not to get so angry at like little things, or get so frustrated and overwhelmed. So that was something like, that's something I'm recognizing more, and yeah, I mean, it's hard like to change those habits too, you know, like it's just difficult. It's a difficult process. There are things that like I'm learning obviously that affect you, but just things I don't like about myself, and changing those things is hard because, you know, those are like, it's like, I think it's like in Atomic Habits, changing a habit takes like 30 to 60 days of actually practicing like not doing that. So it takes a lot of commitment to change to be the people that like we're meant to be, you know. What do you think is like one of like those habits for you, or like that has to do with like a relationship?
I think mine for sure is more on the organizational aspects of things. As we were talking about this
literally today setting up the
podcast. I mean, I would love to, I have my own way of doing things, and Sonny has her own way of doing things. My ideal situation for setting this whole podcast up is different than yours. So I mean, this is a good example of like,
it is
like when
I was getting very frustrated. So I'm like, Cesar, why are you doing it this way? And like, it was like an argument we were having, and it's so silly and so stupid. Just, but like, we both have an idea of the way something's, and like, in reality, like, I'm gonna be real, I was wrong in the situation because Cesar does have a lot more experience with this stuff. Like, Cesar knows what he's doing. So me to add any comments is kind of stupid. But being the amazing fiance is, you know, he'll change things to make me happy.
Of course.
But I'm trying to learn to like not be so like, you have to do it this way just because I feel like you need to do it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, we're in a limited room, and this is like a 10 by 10 room.
It's such a small
very
room.
Tiny.
You can't tell, but it's just so small.
I literally made a TikTok. By the way, check my TikTok out, where I transformed this workstation desk that I normally have my computer and everything on into what we do every Saturday, which is shoot this podcast. And it's a little process, but I mean, if I had longer cables, we could get this moved out of the way. But you like this being set up here, like it looks like.
Yeah, no, you know, I like, and that was just something that Cesar and I were talking about. Is like we have our little mix pad, like, and I feel like that gives it the podcast vibe, aesthetics kind of thing. So like, Cesar knows how to match aesthetics with actually what needs to happen too. So I should trust him more.
But yeah,
silly arguments like that. Like we get into things. you know, but I was thinking, you know, Cesar doesn't ever put his towel where it needs to go.
Oh yeah, that too. I mean, that's part of organization. Again, it's a part of like
falls into the
no. The thing is that I know, like you said, we know about these things, but like you said, it's a habit that you do that you end up just like it's almost like for example, I have a habit of locking every door. I
you go into a room
that I go
and you
into
lock it.
like as I'm turning the doorknob, like my hand is already on the lock and I lock it. So it's like very habitual that I even forget sometimes that I locked the door.
Cesar and I got into an argument
Yeah, about that.
this.
Like, did you lock the door? I'm like, I
Cesar
did.
locked this door to the room that we were in. And,
Yeah,
like, I know Cesar has this habit, but I also was, like, curious. I was like, why did you lock the door?
Yeah, and I was like, no,
like,
just like closed it and then I locked the door and then I forgot. And I'm like, oh.
And he was like, I just locked the door. And I was like, but why?
It comes from living in a household where we were always taught to lock our doors. Like, it's crazy to think about that. No, you weren't. That's why I'm like, when we went to visit your family, damn it, I shouldn't say that publicly.
Oh yeah, no.
Never mind.
I always lock my doors. No, but to be real though,
But I mean, yeah.
Ironically, my house was broken into twice when I was a kid. But no, it's not that I don't know to lock my doors, right? But I had the idea that I recently learned on a call was also wrong. We were talking about this on like one of our Friday calls for our meetings. Is that if I'm home, I don't need to lock the door. Because which I lock my door now, so no people are gonna get in. But that was always my idea, is that if I'm home, I don't need the door to be locked. You only lock the door when you're leaving the house. So that's kind of where that came from. So like you actually like kind of pushed me to, like when I lived in my apartment, I wouldn't lock the door.
I was surprised by that. I'm like,
a lot of college students don't though, because when I lived in my apartment, my friends would come over. And one time they went to the floor below me. I lived on the 3rd floor. And they went to the 2nd floor in the apartment down below me and opened the door.
I went inside someone else's apartment.
And they told me that. And I was like, but it was unlocked. So a lot of college students don't do it either. But I learned to lock my apartment door. I also started locking my bedroom door when I lived with roommates, because I guess that's something you do. But yeah, that's something
so crazy.
Funny. Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh,
that was just crazy. Yeah, but Cesar has like that habit of locking doors.
Yeah, but I mean the towel thing, you know, again, I know I can be better organized, you know, like for example, my computer is another one too, or like file structure. I have certain things that are like organized, but then some that, especially right now, I'm running low on memory, but like I'm putting files everywhere right now because like I'm just that low on memory.
Yeah, I think that too is that I know that Cesar knows organization because he will organize things. It's not that Cesar's disorganized; it's that like he chooses when he's gonna be organized.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that's a bad habit. I mean, it should be. I don't have OCD or anything like
that. For instance, like you know how you want, like for instance, you know how you want all your camera stuff organized. Yeah. You know how you want like your cords organized, but sometimes when you're rushed, you don't organize them, or like you'll leave them everywhere. So like you aren't a disorganized person, you just don't always organize them. But like for instance, one of my bad habits is that because I like things done a certain way, and this is something I just want to say this because my mom might watch this. I love my mom. This next statement isn't say I don't love my mom. I love my mom. But my mom is, growing up, was very much like what I'm about to describe, is like things done a certain way, therefore needed to do them herself, but got frustrated when no one was helping her. And I am very much like that too, is I like things done a certain way. So I go to do it myself, but then I get frustrated because I'm having to do it all by myself. And then I get like overwhelmed and upset. And like, so I'm trying to fix that too, like by asking Cesar for help when I need certain things done. So like, for instance, I always do the laundry, but Cesar and I have, now our system is, so I don't have to do it all myself, is that we split up tasks. So like when it comes to cleaning, like, we'll say like, hey, I'm gonna do this, like I'll take care of like bedroom, like if you'll do the bathroom and that kind of thing. So I feel like that's a happy medium, but I still get a little frustrated because I do want things done a certain way, or even like when we cook or something. So like that's something I'm having to kind of like learned, but I feel like it's in my DNA, man. But yeah, so there's just things that we learned from living together that we've had to work with each other. And also, I think one of the keys here is have patience. Cesar's mom says something. It's paciencia es la madre de las ciencias, which translates in English to patience is the mother of the sciences. So it doesn't really make sense, but it kind of makes sense in Spanish. But patience is something that we both really have had to have. I'd say that Cesar is much more of a patient person than I am. I am very impatient. So I'm still working on that. But in order to get to where we are, we've definitely had to be patient.
Yeah. Yeah, no, patience in any relationship, friendship. Yeah, no, in the sense like be patient. Patience is the key to any relationship, I think.
I think it's the key to like any relationship you have in your life, whether it be a friendship, the relationship you have with like your parents, with siblings. I definitely learned it with my sibling. Again, I mentioned her earlier. My twin sister Rihanna. We had literally quite the rocky relationship from the time that we were born to like I want to say we honestly didn't start getting along till like we turned about 22. We shared the same room for like till I was 18, and we fought all the time. And in my mind I was like, my sister's so stupid, like she's so like annoying and all this kind of stuff. And we're just two very different people. Like, despite the fact that we're twins, we have two very different interests. We're very different people, and it was hard for me to kind of be patient with that. And I didn't necessarily agree with a lot of the decisions my sister was making. And I'd like to think it came out of love, because I do want the best for my sister. But it was hard to be very patient with her. For instance, I was an awful sister. I'm not going to lie. I was very awful for a long time to her because I didn't agree with her. And I regret a lot of the ways I acted towards her because she is my sister. For instance, when she called to tell me she was pregnant, I already knew that she was going to tell me. I already knew. I remember answering the phone. I think I was at work, and I was like, Rihanna. And she was 20 at the time. And the only reason I was upset is because my sister's going to nursing school, and I wanted her to finish school just to, like, because I know it's hard to raise a kid. And I was worried for her. So, like, that word turned into, like, anger. Like, how could you let this happen? And so I didn't react the best way. And I know that hurt my sister. Like, I know looking back, like, if I could take that back, I would. Because I can't imagine what she was going through. And, like, it's a struggle. Like, and like what I should have done in that moment, like talking about this makes me teary-eyed, but like what I should have done in that moment was support her as her sister, like in a moment that is kind of scary. Like, although she was excited to have her daughter, it's scary. And like even now, I mean, I'm 24. If I got pregnant, I would be really scared, because like bringing a life into the world is scary. So I said awful things, I did awful things, and I then learned that I just needed to be patient and supportive with my sister. And now after learning that, I stopped arguing with her. Like, whenever she called me, I just would avoid any argument. I would just not necessarily agree with her, but be like, we just kind of not argue as much with the new mindset that I had. And we have a much better relationship. Her daughter,
you guys do, for sure.
Yeah, and Cesar knows, because he used to see us argue. Her daughter is literally so my world. I love her.
She's awesome.
She's so adorable. Like, I love the FaceTimes I get with her. And like, so, and luckily I was able to help my sister out, like when she had Jezebel, and stuff like that. But I had to learn, like, to be very patient with her, and that Rihanna has her own process and her own mindset. And I don't have to agree with what she does, but I can support her. Like, I can do whatever I can to be a supportive sister. And it's not always easy still. Like, we don't agree on everything. Like, we're still siblings. We still argue. But we have a much better relationship with just me keeping patience and being supportive in mind.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, she's my sister, you know. My parents used to always tell us, ironically, that your siblings will be all that you have one day. And I don't have a really great relationship with my brother, but I I am glad that I have a great relationship with Rihanna because she's grown to understand me too. And yeah, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
So yeah, I've learned to be patient there, and I think I'm learning to be patient with obviously Cesar and our like the issues that we have sometimes. Again, I said our relationship isn't perfect. We have our own issues. There are always gonna be, ups and downs, but we've definitely learned. I think we've learned to navigate through all of our experience, just how to make each other. I don't even want to say happy because I watched this thing. This is like sort of on topic. I watched this thing from Will Smith. He has this like, I don't know if it's like a short documentary on YouTube, but he talks about like your partner's job isn't to make you happy because like that's like an impossible task, like, and like happiness is different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like what makes people happy is different. And I think about that a lot too because often when we're going through things, I think about like this isn't fair for me to put on you because like for instance when I'm going through like really difficult times or when I was very very depressed in a deep dark hole, like a lot of it got put on you, and I think back I'm like this isn't fair to put on you because I can't expect you to fix my problems when I can't fix them myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't put this on you to be like, here, fix this, because sometimes, not that it's not fixable, but it's not on you to do. So, I think Cesar and I, though, like, we do what we can to make each other happy, but at the end of the day, my whole happiness can't be based off you.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to do other things, got to find other things that make me happy. So I've kind of learned that, you know.
That's true. I remember we talked about that too back in the day.
Back in the day. Cesar always says back in the day as if like
it's
like literally, it could be yesterday or it could be 5 years ago. So like he uses that term so frequently that you never know how back in the day he is. But I do have a couple questions for Cesar, to give him some airtime. But where do you think that you struggled with most in our relationship? Like what do you think was the hardest places or moments to get through?
Yeah, this is a difficult topic. I would probably.
All about being vulnerable here, baby.
No, I would probably say, because you said the most difficult, right?
The most. Where did you think you struggled most? Like in our relationship span, like from the beginning to now.
I would probably say again because like for the longest time, before I met you, I had gotten out of relationship years before. I can't even remember anymore. So like I liked doing things my own way. Like just I had my time. Again, at that point in my life, I was working towards something greater. Like I wanted to do so much. I was like everywhere. So I like that. I like being able to like, hey, I want to work on this. I want to work on that. But once I was in a relationship, that was probably the most difficult thing I struggled with because then I had to, in order for me to make this work, I had to balance it out. And finding out what that balance was, that was the most difficult. Like what it was, and we were literally just talking about this yesterday, was like what I had to do in order to make sure, again, not to make sure that you're happy, but more in the sense of like what am I doing to make sure that this like relationship is I don't know if this is let me know if this is the right word or not. If not, I'll erase this. Like sustainable. I don't know, is that even the right word? Yeah. Like is this relationship sustainable with me doing all these things and then finding out like talking to you about it, because there's at this point in my life I had so many people tell me so many different things.
Yeah.
Like saying you need to do this, you gotta, you have to do XYZ, whatever it is, and like everyone's relationships are different. So yeah, that would probably be the most difficult. It's just like going from me wanting to do everything and take on the world to like kind of figuring out what I can do,
Finding balance.
I think, yeah. Balance. That was Yeah. And for some people and their relationships, like they can do whatever they want. I don't know. Like, I mean, that's probably not the right word to say. Not to say they can do whatever they want. Not to say that I can't do whatever I want. It's more in the sense of like.
You sound like I'm putting a gun to your head.
No. That's why I don't want to. That's what I don't want to say. It's more in the sense like, look, like it would be unreasonable for me to be like, hey, Sonny, I'm gonna go in my car and drive to Arizona today. Like, first of all, why am I gonna do that? Like, is there a reason?
Some people don't take.
Reason? You know,
I think what you're trying to get at is that some people don't take into consideration their partners.
Yes,
and that's because their partners, or in some cases, their partners aren't like, oh, you don't need to, like, their partners are more like okay with it, or sometimes maybe they're not, but like.
Or just don't say that they're not.
I think the whole thing is like you've learned that, like, obviously for this relationship to work, on both parts we have to take into consideration each other. Like, how will my actions affect one another?
Yeah, and especially since, you know, we're looking to get married.
Yeah.
Like, a part of that and the journey when you're married, at least in my perspective, is that you need to take into consideration your significant other, your spouse, in all of the decisions that you make, because it's going to affect both of you. Like, whether you, for example, whether you decide to get a job somewhere else in a different state, that's a big move. You know, it's like a huge move, because let's say you're comfortable where you're at now, but now, like, you're going to have to move, and then moving is a big deal, like, especially if you have kids, like school districts, all these things. Or are you homeschooling? What are you doing?
It's
like,
also,
it's just, like,
I think, in the aspect too, and I had this conversation the other day with one of my friends too, is that in that case too, like, some people don't want to sacrifice their career. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you're in a relationship, for instance, I had like a huge job opportunity in like another state. Mm-hmm. Like, that would probably be a bit difficult conversation for us, because us moving, obviously, for me to do something to make a better career also means that you have to figure something that works there.
Yeah. And that was actually, it's funny you bring that up. That was actually the initial, that frame of thinking you're thinking now is literally what was going through my mind when you had asked me that question years ago. It was like, would you move? It's
like, how do I find a job there? That kind of thing.
Or how did I
work from there?
At this point in time, I was working for a business, and like, I was passionate about what I was doing. I wanted to work there. I was like, how am I supposed to do what I do here? I can't, like, I was managing all the tech and all the stuff, so like, I would have to replace myself and just basically leave, and I didn't want to do that at the time.
Yeah, I think the thing there too that becomes difficult in that situation is that if you're in a relationship where both of you are working individuals, you can't put out the idea that your career is more important, right? Like, mm-hmm. I believe both of our careers are very important. So how can we both pursue what we want and be where we want to be and do what we mm-hmm. want to do together? And that does get hard because, like, or for instance, we work in similar but different industries. And I mean, Cesar and I talk about this a lot because there is opportunity for us to live in other places. And I want to be a career baddie, you know, like, I want to be super successful. I have big career goals, and I know Cesar does too. But we have to make sure both of them can be worked on together, and that can be hard for some relationships. I will say at some point sacrifices do have to be made, you know. Relationship is nothing without sacrifice. Sometimes there isn't a way to make both people's like dreams a reality at the same time. I think back to One Tree Hill. There's an episode where, like, it's like Haley's career or like Nathan's basketball, and like, I think, you know, in an ideal world, like, you're both pursuing what you want at the same time and you're making it work, but sometimes there is sacrifice that needs to be made.
Yeah, no, of course. And that's the thing that, again, at the time I didn't want to make that, so But yeah, not to.
You're like at the time, I was not gonna do that. For me, like I can also understand that though, because for me it wasn't as much of a sacrifice because I was planning to leave Florida regardless if I was dating Cesar or not, because I was gonna find a job anywhere. I would have just gone wherever the wind blew me. That's how bad I wanted to leave Florida. It just wasn't for me. But sacrifice is a huge part of it, and just in any relationship. But Cesar and I work to make sure we both can pursue what we want to pursue at the same time for the most part. I think where I struggled most though was trying to think. All of it's been a struggle. No. Dang. I think moving here was probably my biggest struggle. And not because I wasn't happy, because I was so glad when I got to move here. Like, we drove here from Florida. Cesar helped me pack up my apartment and get rid of things. And then we drove across the country together amid the pandemic. And it was great. I was finally in Vegas and, I had a job. But I think a part of me didn't know how hard it was going to be. And I already struggled a lot with anxiety, but I did get really depressed. And I've struggled with depression for the past 2 years. And I struggled with anxiety for the past 2 years. Anxiety probably longer. But it was hard realizing I couldn't understand why I was so upset. Like, why I felt the way I did when I did something that was supposed to make me happy. So I struggled a lot with that, and you saw there were a lot of sleepless nights and crying, and sounds like we have a child, but it's just me. And it was difficult to navigate, and some days it still is. It's gotten easier because I know I have you to support me and help me through whenever I have doubt or anything, but it was definitely so hard, especially because I had left my friends that I had in college, like Spencer, Laura, Roman, and Savannah, and all of them. I had finally found my core group of friends. Leaving them was so hard, and it's I was doing something that I really loved, but at the same time was so painful. So it took a while to figure out my emotions. So I think that was super hard. But thing to bring up too is that Cesar is my first real relationship. I hadn't really dated anyone before I met Cesar, but Cesar has prior relationships. So I came up with this very vulnerable question. What do you think you had to unlearn from your past relationships?
Oh man, I didn't even see that question on your tablet. but man, I definitely had to unlearn that I can't fix everything. Because that's the thing. I used to always want to fix everything, and then I realized you know what, I can't. There's some things that, again, you realize that you have to, again, talk to each other about. And there's some things that require other people to talk to about, whether professionally or whatever the case is, and and then even that's not even fixing things. It's just helping you figure out what it is that needs to be addressed. And I used to be the person who just wanted to fix everything. So
yeah, I guess that.
Yeah, so just I want to figure this out, what is going on, and that's something that I needed to forget, that I needed to realize no, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think it's also that was not a struggle in our relationship, but definitely something we had to take into account, is that you were my first real relationship. Surprisingly, I wasn't a catch for the guys, just wasn't me.
Oh my God.
People weren't attracted to me. I'm just kidding. I'm beautiful, but
yes, you are.
Thanks. But you were my first real relationship, and I had like obviously talked to other guys before, and I had done the Tinder thing because everyone does, and but I never really had like a serious relationship before you, and so I had to learn a lot in that process. And Cesar is older, just so everyone knows. No, yeah, Cesar's older than me too, so there was kind of like a little self-doubt in my mind because when Cesar and I started talking to each other, I was 19 and he was 24. And then I turned 20 and he turned 25, and, so on and so forth. So Cesar is almost like 4.5 to 5 years older than me, which my parents also didn't know when I first started dating him because he looks so young. They're like, how old is he? I was like, oh, he's 25. And they're like, oh, wow. And I was like, yeah, But there was like a kind of self-doubt in me. I was like, am I not mature enough for this man? Like, because I was at such a different point in my life too. So there was that insecurity I had. So I also felt like I needed to act more mature with Cesar. Yeah, but it was different. I think that's too, like, in the beginning of our relationship, Cesar and I didn't really argue a lot. And I think that set up like a unreal like precedent that like our relationship was going to be perfect. And so then when we started having issues, I didn't know how to deal with them because I had never had to deal with that before. So there was a lot of things I had to learn just about relationships. And yeah, so it wasn't more unlearning for me, but it was a lot of learning how to navigate relationships. And yeah, it wasn't difficult, but it definitely was like a new experience for me because again, like, just didn't date anyone, just didn't have the experience Cesar had. But yeah, I think the whole point of this episode too is just that growth, that you don't have to go at growth alone. You can. There's nothing wrong if you feel that the best thing for you is to figure out what you want and like grow by yourself for a while. But I think ultimately, if you find yourself being with another individual, it's important to learn how to navigate growth together because you're never done growing. If you're doing growth the right way, you're always going to be growing in some way, shape, or form. And you can do that with another individual because if you can't do it with another individual, then you probably shouldn't be with anyone because like you should be constantly growing. There's no point where you're going to be like, yep, okay, well, I'm perfect now. I'm always feeling like I have more to learn, more to become the best person that I can be. But I think part of that is not just finding the right person to be with, it's finding the right group of people to surround yourself with. I have Cesar here, but I also do have a core group of friends that I can lean on and I can trust and that can help me grow too. Like, my friends are a great support system that I have, and although I don't live close to them, I do confide in them when I'm feeling doubtful. And having them just remind me to keep pushing, keep going, and that's super important because the people you surround yourself on can have a huge impact on how you live your life.
For sure, no, they can.
It's like if you have people that are like not as motivated or not like have a different, not that they have a different, like everyone can have a different mindset, but so that's not the right terminology. But if you have people that, for instance, I don't even know what to say. Motivation comes to mind because if you surround yourself with people who aren't motivated, you're less likely not to be motivated. So who you surround yourself with really matters. And I've learned that as well. And yeah, you don't have to go out alone. That's my huge thing is like, it's easy to try to fight life's biggest battles by yourself. And for me, I know that I struggle with not wanting to confide in people because I don't want to bother people. I don't want to seem like a burden. But I've learned that, people who love you aren't going to see it that way, And so just confide in people and then also have patience. Be patient with yourself and be patient with others. So I'm learning both. I'm learning, obviously, that I need to have patience with myself. I'm someone who is very driven and very like wanting to move forward and want to move fast, and a lot of growth is slow and painful. It's for me, it's too slow. But I'm having to be patient with myself and where I'm at. Like, a lot of times I'm a lot harder on myself. I'm my own worst enemy. And I'm learning that I need to be patient with myself, but also with other people. Especially patience is important in like every aspect of your life. Be patient with the people you work with, be patient with the people that you surround yourself with, just have patience. And know that, like, you're going to continue growing. You're going to get to where you want to be eventually. This is the cheesiest saying. This is a marathon and not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of obstacles along the way, a lot of mountains you got to climb, a lot of holes you got to get yourself out of. And a lot of times there's not a lot of ways to avoid them. Cesar and I do a lot of self-reflection of, what we would have done looking back at this situation. But whenever we talk about that, I also recognize that everything that's happened has led us to where we're at now. So as some of those things were, as painful as some of those things were, they led us here.
Mm-hmm.
And here is a good place,
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm often someone that can't be consoled by these things, but just remember, like, you're not alone. We've been through a lot of this, and that you just got to keep going and find that support system and just grow. Cesar, do you have any last tips for our listeners?
No, I think you've...
Come on.
I think you said...
Gotta have one tip.
I mean, I talked about patience earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talked about, again, I talked a little bit about, like, what you're saying, actually, not trying to do things alone. Usually isn't the best idea. And another one too is, just don't let yourself get beat down. Don't try, especially if you know something and you're knowledgeable about a subject, whether it's your job or a task. Like, don't let people step on you, because at the end of the day, you're gonna end up, if you continue to let that happen, it's gonna continue to happen, and it's not good at the end.
Yeah.
It's not.
I think my last piece of advice here too is, kind of playing off of that, is don't let the world's idea of who you need to be shape your growth journey. You know deep in your heart who you are meant to be. Or you're still figuring that out, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. For the longest time, I let people determine my path and determine who I was supposed to be based off the versions of me that they liked. But the only person who can determine your growth and where you need to head is yourself. Don't let the world shape your path. Let you be in control. Be in the driver's seat. Go after what you want to go after, despite what other people think. I think it's so easy to play the comparison game and to fall into the trap of just people pleasing. And I'm the biggest hypocrite because I am such a people pleaser, and I'm having to unlearn that as well. But just for the love of God and everything that is good, just do what is best for you. Sometimes we have to be selfish when it comes to ourselves. We have to look after ourselves, and I think that's my biggest thing. But in doing so, because this podcast is from growing together to growing apart, I did that backwards. From growing apart to growing together, you can go through that process. While you could be selfishly focused on you, you can still be there for others and help assist in relationships and in their growth journey as well. Mm-hmm. So I just want to leave you guys with that. We're so glad if you made it to the end of this podcast. This is truly something Cesar and I had been wanting to do for a while. We had the podcast equipment and everything, but it just took a lot of time and stuff to get figured out. But we're really happy that you're here, and we want to continue doing this and providing just the information that we have. Like I said, we're not experts, but we're just helping you learn based off our experiences. And if you have anything that you might want us to discuss in a future episode, leave it down in the comments. We post every Monday on YouTube and all the podcast stream platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And yeah, this has been Growing Together with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
See you next week.
See you guys later.